Caner Universe, it is Caner Tip Tuesday, and listen, we're on the heels of Fall Cane Immersion 2024, and what we're bringing you today is a recap and the highlights and what's happening, what's moving forward. So if you love Sobrevivencia, cane flow, anything having to do with ACSD caning, stick around because there's a lot of different things that came up there. We're gonna share this with you, and I am joined today by none other than Master Coach, the one and only. Some would say, thank God. I love busting his chops, but this is Doc Stull out of the West Coast, out of California, and this was number what for you?
I've been to every one since 2020 except for one. So
and you and I think yeah, that's right, because even during the pandemic when we did it online exclusively.
Yeah.
And by the way, we did an online version of this, and all were this one we did it online as well. We offered that. We don't always do that, but it's nothing but rave reviews this far, so I'm very pleased with it. And just your overall impressions, because you've been to 6 of these, or how many ever, since 2020, and then what's your, where do you put this one, before we get into the details?
I think in terms of variety, Joe, this was probably had more variety and uniqueness, particularly with the healing aspect, which you had talked about and alluded to, but never really done. And so beginning with that, I thought was set a really nice tone, just a nice collaborative tone, and a real feel-good tone where we got to know each other, and you don't often think about that associated with the cane. But yeah, back to your original question. Yes, probably the most variety with the healing part, with the flow emphasis, with Sobrevivencia and Empty Hand, and integrating all of them. So in terms of variety and maybe content per hour, this would have to be up there.
And that was the formula going in. And before I get into that, listen, if you're here for the first time, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future content. And you still have the free resources. Go ahead and text the letter CCC to the number on the screen. In less than 24 hours, we'll be in a conversation with you. We like to schedule it to dedicate the time to listen to you and find out answer all your questions, really, but ACSD SV is really about getting cane trained, and we can have a discussion about canes. Matter of fact, we had canes introduced there, and I'll talk briefly about that at this immersion. We had that, but go ahead and do that before we both forget. And the game plan going in, what we wanted to do, what I in particular wanted everyone to walk away with is to have a feel of what it was like a couple of 20 years ago. You're in the headquarters and you're just getting all of the, it's not just where it's cane only, it's originally a cane empty hand system. If you follow SB for Maestro Reese, it is a cane empty hand, and not just a cane, tools in general, right? Because I tagged him the Cuban Ninja, and that's because that guy comes up with a tool out of anything. He's a master of improvisation, and so it has so many other components. And it started off on Tuesday evening with the bonus of healing. What does a cane have to do with healing? Well, many years ago, and I said it at the immersion, the 3 main line, of which ACSD is one of them, the American Cane Arts, and the other 2 founders of those arts, always integrated from the very onset. They had a healing component to it. One with shiatsu, the other one did it through yoga. I brought my background as a doctor of naturopathy and licensed body worker, and that's one of the things that we shared. There was this thing that we called back in the day quantum cane healing, based on quantum, the quantum concept. Today we call it canergetics, less on the word healing, so as not to give the wrong impression as to what it's about. But it really is about recovery and giving the body an opportunity to do its thing. And just off the top of my head, John Daly, John's out of where
Maine. I believe.
He's out of Maine. That's correct, and he's a coach. A lot of people don't know this because he's not as active and he's not as out there as yourself and the other coaches. But John is educated with that cane, and he was, he was my receiver as I worked and demonstrated. And we have, if you go on Facebook, you can hear him talking about his experience with that and how that went. What was your take on that? On the whole, you're coming in for the first time. What is this? What does cane have to do with healing?
Right. Well, I think most folks, if they're familiar with martial arts in general, have heard of pressure points, and they associate those points on the body with pain. I think this was the opposite of that, is that somebody who's trained and skilled like you can use those same pressure points and apply minimal pressure, and it can become a relaxing thing. And so John had the benefit of you going over when he was lying on his stomach prone, of getting the benefits of that.
Mm-hmm.
But even he was the only one of us who was able to avail himself of the benefits of that. But even that soft wave-like action where we had everybody just go very easy and start brushing, I would have thought that initially, well, I don't know, does this really have an effect? But the interaction and the suspension of judgment, you can really feel that sense of touch, even if it's a very, very light touch and it's a loving touch, it puts you in a different state of mind. And I thought that was just really a different approach.
And to be clear, and not necessarily that we're going over pressure points, and I didn't mention, I may have referenced some. Inevitably, there's points all over the body, but it's not focused on that. It actually has to do more with that energy, and that we don't, I take a lot of the mystical aspect of it and just, present it like you would, like if you're talking about anatomy and physiology. In the West, we don't really go into that, but in other cultures it is, and so that's what it had to do. We explained concepts of resonance and entrainment and some of the things that we do to bring people up, really. That's essentially what it was about. But that was that Tuesday evening bonus. A lot of good, in the same way that with the cane. Listen, cane is about doing. We can sit here and talk about it all day long, but it's about doing. This was about feeling. I mean, either you're feeling something, you're not feeling something. Is there something really going on there? And I had caners come back and say, I slept like a baby.
Yeah. No,
so it does a nice number on your nerve system, and that's how it was back in the day in the headquarters. You had all these big guys, and right after work on, they're sweating, they're face down. Then you're taking that cane very intentionally and very strategically, putting it in a particular sequence. There's things that you're doing with the breathing, and so it would bring about this relaxation effect, and that's what happened there on day one. We'd like to keep that model moving forward. I'll talk about that. And then day two was a day of Sobrevivencia. That was Wednesday morning. That was the day with Maestro Reese. And what a treat to be able to have the founder of that art, and with its history over on the island. Your overall take, what did you enjoy most about that?
Well, Reese himself as a character, as a writer, I would describe him as enigmatic, charismatic, and quirky. And I bet you would agree with me. He is a really different cat.
He's different.
He is a different guy. He has a great sense of humor. I think he sensed that people really responded to him and did more and more as the day went along. But the unusual thing about him is that when he would demonstrate, and I was generally the person that he was demonstrating on, you just couldn't find him. He just, push me, grab me, or whatever. I never felt like there was any overt resistance. It's the opposite of that phrase. I'm here for you. He was never. He was never there for me.
He's just not there.
He was
for you.
never there
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
And the movements were so deceptively simple. And
I'm going to stop you right there, and this is why. And then I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's huge what you just said right now, because if you're watching, and you're a follower of SV and that whole concept, right? So if you're over the age of 45, you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. And the whole idea of, listen, I'm no longer the biggest, strongest, fastest, youngest, but I still need to win. And you're hearing this description. Listen to this because this is key. Reese is in his 70s, and he's just not there for you, right? You're coming at him, you're trying to set up this attack, this assault, and he's showing you, and you're coming as hard as you may. You know, you want to come and you want to come quick and try to surprise him and whatnot, and he's just not there for you. And then the movements, you said, are simple, right? The movements are gentle. This is not the, you know, triple somersault in the air with the 3 hit, you know, all that stuff is fine, but it's just very easy ways that are based on natural movements. And obviously he's a master of this. And go ahead, I didn't mean to, but I just wanted to emphasize that because that's your description of it. Say he's just not there, and this is part of how you win when you're no longer the fastest, strongest yet, right?
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting is you go back to very, very primal movements. You go back to things like just swaying and how good that feels, or the oppositional effect you get when you're walking with your arm coming out to your lead leg when you're walking. These are all things that nobody really has to teach you to do. They just naturally either come from primal instinct or they feel good to do by themselves. And they're all based on that. So there's a complexity factor, often a sophistication factor that might turn people away from certain arts because they seem too complicated. His are very, very simple movements. And in many ways you have to unlearn movements that you've learned before. And I think everybody I talked to, you kind of felt the same way. It's like you're almost unlearning things that were complex to make them simple again.
And you're coming, a lot of us coming from the perspective of having had experiences in previous arts, and we want to make this more than this simplicity, and you end up getting in the way of yourself. Is what we found with this. So the harder you try, don't try so hard and don't get out of your head and just how you've been walking your whole life, for instance. Don't try to change that now. Don't try to think of it. If you get up and walk, you don't sit there and go, well, I got to take this step first and then do right. Generally, that would be the case. And the emphasis, the theme was flow. And that's what he kept, fluidez in Spanish, that's what he kept referring to, and he kept saying that this is flow. And there were so many instances, every time he would just, see, this is flow. You do this, this is flow. It was interesting because there was a switch in gears, and someone asked, I believe it was online, about how to handle individuals who are high on drugs. When they, they're beyond the pain threshold, there's no control there. And he fussed about it. He said, no, this isn't how we go about it. And the big deal there, his big word, became control. And I'm not going to get into the details of this, but one of the things that he did, and again, he's a very unusual, unpredictable guy. People looking at me, and don't look at me, because he's as unpredictable for me, even though I've been, communicating with him for 14 years now. Just as unpredictable for me as for anyone, but somehow out of that duffel bag of his, he put out, and he had like 9 sardine cans that he just threw out on the floor, and he taught a lesson out of that, but it all came back to control. Do you recall that?
I do. Yeah, I do. Although, and control.
That was one of the
can be
things.
Part of restoring harmony.
Yeah.
It may not come to that. It may be that you just are adept enough verbally to diffuse a situation, and you don't have to do it. But on the other hand, he had the physical skills to be able to do that. But the more you look into this, and of course you're talking to people who are vintage age. I'm in my 70th year myself.
Yeah.
It's appealing because you realize you're not going to be bigger, faster, stronger. And so if you didn't figure it out before, you should figure out now that diffusing it and not being there in the first place is really the most important thing that you can do. The other thing I thought when you were talking is adaptability is genius.
Adaptability.
He really is a testament to adaptability, because he had to adapt to a severely oppressive regime where you didn't have control other than your own mind.
Correct.
To survive it, and so he's certainly imparted that.
For those who are watching, they've never, listen, and I'm just going to tell you straight up, you know how I am. I just look at you in the face, boom, and I tell you, if you're an SV practitioner, if you want to learn SV, you got to get out here. You got to do whatever you got to do to get out here to Miami, if at all possible, so that you have an opportunity during these times to learn it, directly with the founder. Your perspective, he kept referring to you as Uki, which is, Japanese for, the guy who he gets to work with, and you get to feel what it's like firsthand to work with the maestro. Just some feedback on that, your thoughts on that.
Well, because I worked with you for a time, I do know where the radial nerve is, and I can certainly say that didn't need reinforcing, but I certainly found that out. But yes, he demonstrated on me, and it would obviously take a lot of time and practice to learn this, but everything he did seemed very easy and natural. When we tried it, did we get it the first time, second time, third time? No, it's almost like you're unlearning certain reactive motor patterns that you've developed and learning how to relax and then try to do it. And that was the biggest challenge.
And one of the hallmarks, if you listen to everybody that's worked with him, is you come at him, he's not there, so you're whiffing, with the attack. But then he has you in such a position where either you're losing your balance, you're having a hard time recovering the position, your biomechanics are thrown off, and people just say, I feel locked up.
Yeah.
My leg is jammed, and unless he points it out to you, you don't realize it, but then you try to move out of there and you can't, and he's not really grabbing you, so it's really interesting how he does all of that. That was day 2. We could talk about it forever with Maestro Reese. Day 3, that was my show, and that was part 1 of the show. And by the way, before day 3, after that evening, we had an outing in Margaritaville, and the ACSD shirts which are super cool, and just a wonderful, wonderful time. So if you're watching this and you're considering coming, this to us is we like to have fun. If you don't like to have fun, then this is not for you. But we had an outing, went out there to Fort Lauderdale, just a wonderful, wonderful time. And then on day 3, that was a day of SV flow, and SV flow is my expression of taking Sobrevivencia with the cane flow. The purple shirt, there's a lot of significance in there. Purple, to me, where I come from, was representative of the healing arts, and we were sharing that for the first time. But it's the first one that has all 3 logos, the ACSD, the cane flow, and the SV. So that was all by design. And that first day, it was part 1 of movement. Immediately with me, we're going right on the floor, and from day 1, I'm about let's do this, and let's move. Let's see where we're at. Let's take inventory. Let me see where everybody is in terms of a circle. How are you moving? Because if you're going to, quote unquote, and I hate to use the word prescribe, but if I'm going to encourage this or help you with this or make suggestions, how can I make suggestions if I'm not seeing where you're at right now? It's like a mechanic or a doctor who is trying to go ahead and give you something that's going to make you better without seeing where you're at right now. Let's take inventory. That's how I started that. And then here it is. And then tied into the application, the movement, the application. This is the benefit of the movement done solo. This is how you do it with a partner. This is how you apply it. That was part 1. It was a 2-part for me. Your thoughts on day 3 of SV Flow?
So go, Joe. It's about flow, and I know, having had experience 30 years in radio, that one of the deaths in radio is if you interview somebody and they just give you a yes and no answer, or they stop right there, and your producer's going to go dead air. All right. What you want is somebody who is very talkative and verbal and effusive and and flowing, and you can get that interview going, and you start to create a connection, and you keep it going.
Indeed.
And so it's really the same thing that I believe you're imparting and tying in all three of these things together, so that it's not a discrete beginning and end. I think we're acculturated to just think, okay, I respond to this, it's over. No, we keep going. You keep moving. You keep flowing. And I think that actually, as a concept, it's simple, but to put it in practice, you have to get over yourself and do it. And that often means sometimes you don't feel comfortable expressing yourself and moving in certain ways. So you have to fight certain demons that say, what am I doing here? Is this, does this, and you have to suspend judgment. And one of the beauties I've found, been lucky enough to learn from you and in my own teaching, is taking people who really feel awkward moving and getting them to appreciate the feelings they get from moving. And once they feel more comfortable moving, you add the cane, and now you have a manipulation skill, and you add that onto the footwork, and lo and behold, you're feeling more confident. And that all transfers into self-protection, but it also transfers just moving for moving's sake and the feelings you get from that. And I think that's a real benefit in working with you and working with Reese and SV.
And good things happen, we always say, when we get you to make medical claims. Day two, in other words, the last day for me was the crescendo. I mean, we wanted to bring it and make it the best, and I believe that was the case. It certainly was for me. I shared the chug flow, which I hadn't shared out there. Concepts of coming from a down up. Again, going back to the healing and talking about the shoulder, and we had one of our master level caners, Lee Gates, talking about the surgery he had, and you have Joe Fielding, who also had a shoulder, and so, hey, can you talk about that? And I shared the protocol that I used with the cane to bring that shoulder back. No surgery, and again, I'm not recommending that. You don't bypass. You're working with a physician. I'm not making any medical claims here. I spoke about my experience. I demonstrated that out there, and our caners find value in those experiences and the sharing of those experiences. But that healing aspect of it, we brought that back, and then that chug flow in particular, how that takes stress off of the joints, because we want to be doing something that you can do for the rest of your life, and that is gentle. And here's the key: it's not going to tear down your body. We probably already did, all of us, a lot of that, enough of that, decades ago, and now we're to the point where what we want to do is just get the benefits, but without tearing down the body. And that's what it was about. And then how does that transfer into the empty hand? We took a look at that. And then one of the highlights was the revealing of this SV cane. And I don't know if I jumped ahead there for you, but your thoughts on that? I mean, that was special because we've never had a Sobrevivencia cane before. What is that supposed to look like? And I'll say some things about that, but your take on it.
Well, just backing up a little bit,
Yeah.
when you were talking about some of our caners who are dealing with pretty
Injuries
difficult
and
injuries and things like that, one of the things that has always come out from your teaching and your background in exercise physiology and neuroanatomy and things of that nature is that you don't lock out joints. When you're touching your toes, you don't lock out the knee. When you're using the cane with a power shot, you're not full extension at the elbow. Those are all things where you don't put stress on your joints, even to the point where working out with bands and things of that nature, where again, if you're of vintage age, you're gonna if you go hard, you're gonna start to develop injuries, and it takes so much longer to come back from that. So I think it's just a really, really valuable way of looking at it. And in my experiences, the exercises we've done in ACSD and in Sobrevivencia have all been, again, taken from very primal natural movements. And if you do them correctly with biomechanic, and you're very good about correcting that, you don't have those injuries, and if you're not in pain, you enjoy it more. If you're in pain, it's tough to get up and train. You may love it, but it's still, you're overcoming that mentally.
You want the benefits of the movement, of the training, of the strengthening, of the flexibility, of the coordination without destroying your body. That's what this is all about. And I'm not going to go real heavy into this. I'll show it here on the camera real quick. SV, you know, it works with any cane. It works not just with a cane, but it works with an umbrella, with a doll, with whatever it is you have in your hand. But for some time now, you know, I've been thinking in my cerise about an SV cane, and we finally came up with something. I'll just show it here. We call it the Sage, after the maestro there. and this, it's got the particularity of being the green color cane, and you can get this in other colors. But this is a very light cane. This is in a 7/8. We have it in a heavier octagonal 1 inch, and I know you hung around with this one for a bit. And you know, these are standalone. This is separate from ACSD. It has its own life. It has its own identity based on, you know, Maestro looked at it, endorsed it. He'll look at canes that are just amazing, amazing canes, and they have all this work done on it, and he'll say these canes are amazing, but he'll shoot them down because he feels they call a lot of attention. So we feel that this cane in particular flies under the radar, right? In terms of you know, calling attention, and it's got to be something that because he's just brutally honest. He doesn't know how to be another way about this. You know, he'll just say, hey, this is really nice, I love it, it's great, but it wouldn't be for this SV lineup. So you were able to move around a little bit with it. It's really light. I want to say a couple things. So something like this, you know, for those of you that are brand new and you're saying, hey, is that a good cane to start off with? It is, in terms of the fact that you're never going to call us back and say the cane's too heavy, too difficult to maneuver, but it's really nice looking, and I don't know that something like this is what you want to go with if you're first starting off and have to drop this and chip it, unless you're getting two of them. You know, that player by our friends over at Cane Masters is still, you know, our go-to. We go to that a lot because it was designed to get beat up and so on and so forth, and it can withstand the rigors of training. But if you're an SV follower, a practitioner, an enthusiast, yeah, you're probably gonna want one of these, and this is just my opinion. You hear me? Whose opinion? My opinion, right? If you get in, you can get it in black, you can get it in red, but if you get it in any other color other than green, I think it defeats the purpose of SV. And you know, you use a phrase, one line from the movie, which is, right? It defeats.
Well, yeah, it was a De Niro line, actually, in A Raging Bull. And he said, yeah, you overcooked that steak. It defeats its own purpose.
It defeats its own purpose.
Yeah,
but that's just my taste. Your thoughts on that? That was exciting because we're able to unveil it there, and I'll do a whole, you know, videos about it. All that is forthcoming. Our caners are already placing orders for it. Go ahead.
Well, it made me think. I mean, one of the beauties of SV is that you don't call attention to yourself. You have no interest in calling attention to yourself. Right.
Out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
He felt it in his bones.
Right. Yeah. You don't grandstand, and you're more interested in talking to the other person about them than you are talking about yourself. And it kind of reminds me of when you read about somebody. Again, I'm the age now where if you go to a 40th, 50th high school reunion where you've lost a lot of people, and one of the interesting things about that is the people that you read about that you might have sat next to in class, and they were quiet, and it turns out they were a world-class cardiologist or a CEO of a tech company, and they weren't the people that you noticed in high school, the guys with the leather jackets or that were calling attention to themselves. And so it kind of reminds me of that in the SV, it's all about not calling attention to yourself and not becoming the object of attention.
Indeed. And then it culminated, as always, we have a roundtable discussion, questions that are asked, and we had graduation, the awarding, and we gave out, I awarded a certification for the teaching the fundamentals of Cane Flow, and that was to you, and congratulations on that, because you've been at that for a while, and you're one of the first to, and certainly in these times post-pandemic, to go out there and you're actually teaching a program of Cane Flow over at Humboldt, and I felt it was just appropriate, and I had you share there. I said, hey, you know, we're going to pick a topic I give you and go off, and I wanted to do that because those of you, we have so many, in particular, want to teach Sobrevivencia, or you want to teach SV Flow, or you know, you want to teach something, you want to introduce it to others, and the way that we do it, it's not, hey, you're front center, now we're going to grill you, and it's not in that, but it's more like you're sharing with the group, like a restaurant, a movie, something that you're excited about, and hey, let me just share. It should always be done in that spirit. That's how we did it. Thank you always for your enthusiasm and your work, and you can talk a little bit about SV Flow and you know, what you're doing there with Cane Flow and what you're doing over in California, and how you see it, because I know you see it all through the lens of flow.
I do. I'm a communicator, and I was in radio for 30 years and in education, but I also a jazz aficionado, and a lot of jazz, of course. Jazz is improvisation, and it is rhythm, and there's a melody, but you can deviate from that melody, and really that's what you're doing. When you start to move with the cane, is you can start out with some very, very basic movements like swaying back and forth, or doing a little two-step, which we call a step drag, and once you get people moving their feet, then you gradually start to add handling, and when you get that together, whoa, well then if you start getting good, maybe you add a different kind of footwork to that handling, and you progress as far as that goes. So I kind of like the idea of people who maybe, in fact, my favorite people are the people who haven't had any traditional martial arts training, people from the arts that are intrigued with the idea that flow combines the elements of dance, of juggling, but also martial principles, which are half-body principles, taking your center line away, stepping off line, keeping your elbows in. These are all really important dance and movement principles, but a lot of them still apply in terms of self-protection. But it's a backdoor way of getting people interested in that. So I enjoy that challenge of doing it kind of in a non-traditional way, but getting people excited about it.
Indeed, indeed. Well expressed as always, Doc, and it all culminated with an outing. We like those. We like to go and have fun, and this one had it all. It had the teaching. It had it was so well rounded in terms of the content. I do have to rank it pretty much at the top in terms of the content, because I was able, it was not just, you know, cane, it was the way I originally put this thing together, the way that the maestro put it together, which is just a back and forth of cane, empty hand, and the other components that make it what it is. This has never been about whacking somebody mindlessly with a cane over the head. That's not what we do. And so we were able to share so many of the different components and show how integrated the art is, and then it had the culture behind it, how appropriate. We wrap it up at Havana Harry's, you know, it's a Cuban cane art, and so just wonderful, wonderful fellowship. I want to thank all of you. You know, Mark Bone, Dr. Mark Bone, who lent some of his, he lent his credibility over there and gave scientific explanations as to the vagus nerve, how it is that, it affects your health, the things that we're doing. We spoke about the drumming, the importance of music, how the different elements and how you're hitting that drum different, how that affects, right, tone, and all these other components that you wouldn't even think of. It's jam-packed. I want to tell you what we're doing, because we discovered that we absolutely love this format. We're going to do it again in winter. It happens 2 times a year. Winter Cane Immersion, always in February 2025. Mark your calendar. February 18th through the 21st. We're in celebratory mode because we'll be celebrating Maestro Reese and my birthday, because they're right there in February during that week and the week before. And so, but in addition to that, we're taking this framework all the different components, sharing it again. But because we've laid this foundation, we're doing, look for it, 5 sessions starting in October, now in October, November, December, January, and February. We're going to be doing SV and flow sessions, Zoom sessions, to prepare for that February immersion. Okay, and so if you're doing that, depending on where we are here in the timeline, you can go ahead, get your information, find out more about it, and you can either enroll in those sessions or not do those sessions. If you're coming to immersion, you get 50% off of those sessions, so you only pay $25 per session. And if you're coming down to immersion, if you don't know anything about immersion, this is the first time, call the headquarters. That's the best way to do it. 800-289-8188. Doc, this has been a fun one. This was a great one.
Been a fun one.
Indeed. Thanks as always for your time and attention.
My pleasure.
And you guys, thanks for watching. Keep caning. Stay safe.